Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Progressives Abroad. This is your host, Boutique, recording live here from Oslo, Norway. And thank you so much for joining us one more time again here on the podcast. One of the things that we really like to focus on, maybe the most important thing that we like to focus on here on the podcast, is really sharing perspectives from abroad, or just this idea of sharing perspective. We talk a lot about what it's like to live outside of the United States or to live outside your home country, but perspective you can find really anywhere. There's perspective around every corner. So maybe you haven't had the chance to live abroad. Maybe you've moved across town, or maybe you just really like trying new things, joining different clubs, or trying different food, testing out different restaurants in your own hometown. You can really gain different perspectives from any corner or avenue of your life. The important part is that we learn from when we change our perspective and when we try new things. And this is something that I know I wholeheartedly enjoy and value, and purposely put myself in situations where I will learn from and gain new perspective. And it's just something that I highly encourage everybody out there to do too. I know I can say from my own experience, just with living abroad, I've lived in many different countries, from Asia to South America to different parts of Europe, and of course in the United States. And every time, on a very broad scale, I move somewhere else, or I live somewhere else, or I live in a new part of town, it's kind of like buying a new mirror, or taking a look in a new mirror. You take a look at yourself and how you interact with those people, those places, what changes you make, how you react to that, how you interact and integrate, and all these things that you can learn so much. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes they're easier than others, but there's always something to learn. So on this show, of course, we like to highlight perspectives from all kinds of people that we meet. And today on the show, we've got a good friend of the show. His name's Johnny D. He's American from Massachusetts, living here in Oslo, Norway. And he first started kind of going abroad for studies, friends, and then for studies. And more recently, because he's become a parent. So we're going to have a really interesting discussion today about what it's like to live abroad, why move abroad, what it's like to study abroad, how is life in Norway as we are here currently situated, as well as what is it like to be a young parent living abroad. So I hope that you enjoy this. Please send us your questions and your comments if you have any questions for me, for the show, or for our guest today, Johnny. So please enjoy this episode, and don't forget to share. Thanks. For a few years, and we were talking just a little bit before the show. So I guess this is actually your third anniversary of when you first came to Oslo. Is that right?
Yep. So I came here on a visit after a family trip to Spain 3 years ago today, April 22nd, to visit Ina, who is now the mother of my almost 2-year-old child. So things moved pretty damn quickly. We met in Mexico a couple years prior to me visiting her in Norway at a party at a taqueria. It's called Technos and Taco.
Sounds
Yeah, good
fabulous.
time, but we had a pretty instant sort of connection, and then, tried to meet up a few times. I came out here for a few days, hit it off, and then started dating long distance. I visited here once or twice. She came to the US for some extended stays, and then during her last visit, which was 4 months into our relationship, knocked her up, and now we have a daughter. So that's what accelerated my transition to trying to live here in Norway, and ever since then I've been back and forth between the U.S. and Norway, and currently waiting on my residency permit to go through.
Wowie, wowie. So yeah, that's quite a like story. I mean, that's how life is, right? It just who knew? Who knew you'd end up
Yeah.
here in Norway? It's not so. I mean, it's not so different than how I got here. Actually, I mean, it was a bit more of a twist. I mean, there's lots of twists and turns, of course, but not so different. I think a lot of people end up abroad, everybody, not just because they're in the military. Like a lot of people assume if you fill out your taxes, it pretty much always asks, were you in the military? Is that why you were abroad? No, people go for all kinds of reasons, not just for business too, but lots of time for love, lots of time for children, family, all kinds of things. And just
Seems like a
motivation.
common trend. I've asked, brought up my situation, and it's especially with Norway. It seems like a lot of the, not everybody, but a lot of the expats that I meet in Norway, it's like, how'd you end up here? It's like, oh, I was following some girl or guy here. They
Mm,
were on vacation, met them, and then Norwegians are good at that. They like are diversifying
yes.
their population pool. I feel like the government gives people bigger vacation time so that they can go out and get some new blood in here, and it seems like it works out pretty well for them. I know, it just seems like everyone, at least that I meet, who ends up here, there's some love factor at play as to how they ended up here.
Yeah, it's usually the case. I mean, there's a few ways. I mean, I think yeah, tons of people come because of love, love migration, I think family migration, these types of things. I think especially from like the United States, and some UK, these places. A lot of people are also coming for like studies, and some people come for work. But
Mm-hmm.
these are the three main ways I would say you get into Norway, unless you are in the unfortunate circumstance of being like a refugee or something like that. Then
Yeah, I've
refugees,
actually
asylum
heard the term
seekers.
of
Yeah,
love refugee
yeah,
for people who end up here because of our situations. So
yeah. It's a
I'm
bit.
just hoping I don't become a real refugee during these Corona times. It's I've been thinking about that too. If I don't get my residency, it's like, well, not exactly the time to go back to the U.S. Maybe there's an argument to be made that you
It
know
might be. Yeah. I mean,
just
you
be
never
letting.
know. I mean, it's kind of. It sounds like a bit of a joke, right? But I've had
Yeah,
this thought. I've had this thought myself before, half joking, half kind of serious. And of course, I mean, I don't want to downplay or by any means the real
yeah,
struggle
definitely
of refugees and asylum seekers.
not.
However, for example, I was at a meeting at the U.S. Embassy, not at the embassy, but the U.S. Embassy was hosting a meeting in Oslo about 2 years ago, maybe.
Hmm.
First time I ever went to one of these meetings, and you saw all the people from the United States get together to speak with the new ambassador who was appointed right after Trump got into office. And this guy, of course, is some kind of Trump surrogate, you know,
Hmm.
and I think I'd be interested to get him on the show. Really, he's still here, I believe. But at the time, people were asking a lot about healthcare because he would ask the question. Oh, by the way, I should also include that we met bizarrely enough in like the Protestant church. I think like the American Protestant Church of Oslo.
Interesting.
Strange, yeah. And it was a very interesting meeting. The point I'm trying to get, a lot of people were asking about healthcare. He said, "Oh, is there any like messages? The whole point of the ambassadorship is to like, we learn things here and we take it back to America, and we bring stuff from America and we take it over here." And people were asking about healthcare, and I think I asked myself, do you think you could, send back the message of a healthcare system, a universal healthcare system? And he gave some really BS answer about how, well, I used to work in the healthcare industry, and so I understand the value of good healthcare. He used to be like a corporate hospital owner or something like that.
Hmm.
Anyways, but afterwards, I had some people come up to me at like the little meet and greet afterwards, and some people came up to me and they were saying, yeah, we would consider ourselves like healthcare refugees. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, well, like my daughter has this, horrible, disease, and we have to stay here. Like we literally can't go back to the United States,
Mhm.
or our daughter would die, or we wouldn't even be able to like get into a insurance system or something like that in time. Like,
Yeah.
it's so dependent on healthcare here. And I think there's a lot of people like that. So, I mean, it's definitely a different kind of situation. But it is a point, you know.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. I mean, there's a lot of people in, Central and Latin America who try to come into the US through the means that they have available to them, which is either, legally or illegally for
Mhm.
very similar reasons too, for healthcare concerns and needs. And because the U.S. system's at least better than some of those places. But then in comparison, we still have flaws in the American system inherently, and yeah, it's odd to think about kind of that need to be seeking refuge in another country, even though your country is still, really well developed.
Yeah, it is strange, and it's actually weird. If you were like going to go a little deeper into this topic, you could like really go down the rabbit hole. But I mean, when you think about, how in the United States, and for those of you, I mean, if you've been following this podcast, then you probably know by now that I like to talk a lot about the healthcare systems throughout Europe, universal healthcare system. But if you haven't been, yeah, we do have a universal single payer system here in Norway, and it is interesting to think of, because typically, people that can legally seek, refugee or asylum status in a country, it's usually they're escaping some kind of political persecution, or some kind of, unjust legal system or something like this for political reasons usually. So, on the surface level, something like healthcare wouldn't be, um, wouldn't be a reason to seek some kind of status like that. However, if you dig into it a little bit deeper and you think about the political decisions that go into, for example, kicking tens of millions of people off healthcare, for, I don't know, capitalistic or financial, gains, to please donors in certain political parties or for certain politicians, then it does start to turn into a very political issue. And it could be argued that a lot of people are actually, I would say, being unnecessarily and unfairly persecuted through the healthcare systems. It's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
kind of future talk right there. Who knows what's going to
Oh
happen?
yeah, so much to get into with that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just like kind of, yeah, futuristic stuff that, maybe will pop up in the years to come. Um, yeah, but yeah, so yeah, but how did we get over here? How did we get into this? Yeah, we somehow got off on the
Love
yeah.
refugee stuff and jokes
Mhm,
about that, and then
mhm. Yeah, but
ended up.
oh yeah, the love refugee. Yeah, so there you got over here. Yeah, a lot of people come over here as love refugees, and um, and you've been here for 3 years now. When you came here 3 years ago, was that that was before or after you met your lady?
We met before that,
Oh, okay.
but we met before that in Mexico, and then that visit was the first time we had seen each other in about a year and a half. But we had
Okay.
kept in touch during that time.
So what was and I mean, you've been to Mexico. Had you been like other places abroad, or like living other places abroad before that time? Or?
I mean, I've had like a lot of friends, international friends, while I was in boarding school and in college. Always just gravitated towards people from different countries. It's just like another like layer on top of a person that makes like a relationship interesting. The differences and similarities that you discover, as you're having a friendship with someone. Uh, and yeah, that just was something that I was always attracted to. So one of my best friends was from Fujisawa,
Mm.
and that was like the first big international trip that I made, was to go visit him for a few weeks
Where's that?
during a spring
Fujisawa?
break.
Where is that?
It's in like the greater Tokyo area, but it's like
Okay.
yeah, maybe like an hour and a half drive from Tokyo.
Hmm. So
Yeah, so
so you grew up like surrounded by a lot of international people. Where did you grow up
I
exactly?
went to a boarding school, and there was like a boarding school was like maybe 400 people in Massachusetts,
Oh wow.
and probably about 50 of the students there were from different countries. Majority of the international students coming from countries in Asia.
Mm.
Uh, And so, had some good friendships with a lot of people. And my friend from Japan, Hide, um, he lived close to me, and we became really close friends early on in high school. Went to the same university too. But when I was 17, went and stayed at his family house, and that really formed my, international traveling experience. Instead of going someplace, checking out like the classic touristy things, I just stayed in his house, and we just hung out with like his friends, and did what 17-year-olds would do, you know, in Fujisawa. And
Fun.
so ever since then, whenever I travel places, it's very much a hang out with the locals, do what the locals are doing. Maybe I'll see a famous site every now and again, but
Hmm.
it's always been more about meeting the people and then seeing the similarities and differences between, our cultures, and kind of that common denominator of, people, and like discovering that, just getting closer through that exchange. So yeah, that was a really formative friendship, and it just kind of built off that. A couple trips to Japan and some of the other countries around there, and then I lived in Istanbul for a study abroad program,
Oh, nice. One of
and
my
then
favorite
did a little
cities.
traveling around there. Yeah, Istanbul is great. I love Turkey. Good people, really fascinating culture. Very happy that I ended up there. And yeah, so just like little trips to Europe here and there over the years. And then I always had a sense that I was going to end up living somewhere abroad. Just was never going to guess that it would be Norway. I thought it'd be someplace a little more sunny and
Well,
relaxed, I guess.
it's really sunny
Uh,
here half the year.
yeah. It's just, yeah, I always just thought I'd be in like a culture that was, I guess, a little rougher around the edges. Like Norway's kind of got their shit so locked down
Mm.
that I was like, I was kind of looking, I think, for something that was a little bit more, you know, I guess
Yeah.
less developed than this. So,
I'm totally with you, man. Like, I also always kind of imagined, I would end up, living abroad at some point, sometime. I mean, it wasn't really part of the plan. It just kind of happened, but
mhm,
it kind of was happened due to some circumstances. And basically, what would you call it? The impetus, like the motivation to move abroad, really was the great economic crash of 2009. I mean,
mhm,
I was always familiar. I was always very, in touch, and I was a student of history and anthropology and all these kinds of things. So I was always very interested in what's happening around the world.
yeah,
Loved National Geographic and the World Atlas and stuff like that. But
mhm,
it was really that thing that really kicked me in the butt to get out of the country. Because there was just no jobs in 2009.
yeah, yeah.
It was done. So I ended up going over to Korea. But um, so when you went to Japan and you came back, like after this, like kind of first big experience, when you were like so young, really, like,
Mhm.
did you feel like that kind of, I mean, of course you can say, oh, it opened up your mind to like a lot of new things and stuff like that. But did you feel anything different, like coming back to the States after that?
Um, yes, it did. Do you have a specific
Like,
point
I
in
mean,
that you're interested
well,
in?
yeah, I mean, what I'm thinking is I'm always, when I go places, I'm always kind of surprised. I go someplace new, I'm always kind of surprised. Oh wow, like little things like, oh, I didn't think about that before. Like, I didn't think
Yeah.
about, like, a really silly example
Mhm.
would be like,
Yeah.
when I first went to Lisbon, I was like, like, I did not expect in these tiny little streets there to be these like cool little like trolleys like going through the streets, and
Yeah.
something like that. I mean, it just, yeah.
Absolutely. It's one of these things that I there's this program in Europe that the universities are a part of. I think you went through a program with them, the Erasmus
Oh, I'm
program.
a big supporter of
Yeah.
this program.
I
Yeah.
I mean, I like, and for people who don't know, it's this program where European students at universities can go study at universities in other countries, and there's like close to no cost to the students
Mm.
to do that. And it's just like paying or whatever they're usually paying for their universities. And, that exchange of like, living in a different place is so valuable. I wish we had something like that in the US. I almost
Yes.
wish that there was a requirement or like a strong incentive that like you have to go live abroad because you just, get so much perspective on what's, you know, what's a normal thing about society and how we function and what's cultural and where the similarities and difference lies. It's if you grow up, good examples like I'm sure lots of people in the US know if they go to like their hometown and it's not in a city, you know, the people who just live in that hometown their whole life. And then their views on things are just, a little bit more funneled than you who might have gone and moved to another state. I think it's just a continuation of that idea. So when I got back from Japan, um, yeah, I just started to notice like the little things within people and their psychology, but just also like social norms,
Mm.
and definitely got me on a route of kind of asking those questions and looking for those things. I'm trying to think of like a specific thing that was a takeaway.
Well,
Um, hmm,
yeah, but
doesn't
no,
have top of mind.
that's a good place to start. I'm sure you'll might think of more in the future, but I mean, I
Yeah.
think in general too. Like, I mean, as a kid, or like as like a young adult, like at 17, it's kind of maybe I think at those points in time, which I've experienced that too, like going someplace, and at first, I feel like you're just wow, like
Hmm.
that's different than this. I'm not exactly sure why, but just like wow. And I think the more the first time you go, maybe it's just more like wow. It's like that first time you go to
Hmm.
Disney World, or like that first time you go
Yeah.
on a roller coaster, you're just like, wow, this is like the first time you go to, like when you go to the top of a mountain or something like that on a hike or something, like you're just like, wow. And then of course, as you experience it more and more, you start to ask questions about these things, like why was that amazing? Like how was that different? But maybe going all the way back to 17 might be a little bit of a big question for a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah, but it kind of like sets a foundation for those
Yeah,
type of questions to come up.
but it's
I know
I,
definitely kind of got me more interested in like people and studying
yeah,
people. I definitely remember having some conversations with teachers. Um, and I forget like how the conversation started, but I remember we were talking about people and how like at lunch I always noticed that people would tell a story and then the next person would talk, and they would always twist it to like talk about themselves. And then she just brought to my attention to like pay attention to that. And yeah, I guess it just started this like kind of quest to like understand the human experience a bit more before I could even really put those type of words to it.
right. Yeah, it just is
So
kind of fuels really it's a really great fuel for curiosity,
yeah.
books can do that, documentaries can do that. And I know when I was a kid, uh and I mean still to this day, but when I was a kid, like I would just suck it all up. Like I would every National Geographic, like every documentary I could find, every anything I could do to like get out into another culture or another society or something like that. It was just so interesting. And then I think there's one thing to kind of like sit as like a kind of a maybe an armchair experiencer, uh,
Mhm.
and be really fascinated and knowledgeable, like book smart about these kind of things, and to like actually go and experience it. I mean, not everybody has that opportunity, and we should just I feel like we should always just take whatever opportunity we can get when it comes to that, even if it's not actually physically going somewhere. But um it is pretty, I like to think of it in a lot of ways as like mirrors, like every you go to Japan
Mhm.
and then you have like a different mirror to look into, and
Yeah.
then maybe you go to Ecuador and then you say, okay, now I can look in the my mirror, the US mirror, and I can also look in the mirror in Japan and look in the mirror in Ecuador, and then all these other mirrors are kind of like looking at each other too, and you get into like one of those like carnival mirror rooms or something like that, where you're
Yeah,
just
yeah.
so there's a lot of reflecting going on. I think that's the I don't know, the metaphor we're trying to make here.
Yeah, yeah. You start to kind of, there's been lots of experiences where, I just like end up in a random situation with some people I spontaneously met. I'm at their apartment and have that moment of reflection where I'm like, yeah, okay, so we're just doing the same stuff that I'd be doing in the US,
Hmm.
just in a different place with some different people. And it's just really, you know, a connecting feeling, and you care more about being aware of what's happening in other places. And I know before my journey into all this, I was not a great history student, but I liked history, and I was, pretty, uh, I guess I paid attention in those classes, and I like took
Yeah.
it all in. So, just trying to get a better sense of, you know, humanity, and like how we ended up at this place, looking at like science and history and art and culture, and just how all those things, you know, in reality are all like one thing, and just feed on one another. It's it's just humbling. It's a humbling sort of exploration to be open to that stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's actually, on the topic of education, it's pretty cool that you brought up the Erasmus program, because I feel the same way about that. I mean, man, I have never seen a more valuable education opportunity. Uh,
Yeah.
and then a lot of people don't know this. Did you ever actually get into any Erasmus program, or you just know about it?
No, no. So when I was in Turkey, I went through one of the study abroad programs that are based in the U.S.
Hmm.
And so I was at a university there, and there was like, I don't know, maybe like 50 or 60 American students, and then maybe 70 or 80 students in the Erasmus program from
Hmm.
different countries around Europe. And I just got close with a lot of people in that program, because I wasn't really trying to go over there to just hang out with the American posse, which unfortunately a lot of people end up falling into,
Hmm.
um, which I can understand. But at the same time, it might be tough to interact with people who have a different background than you at first, but then you get used to it. And
Yeah. That's how you
yeah,
learn.
so
You learn a lot.
yeah, exactly. It's like I've said before, like, the greatest like deterrent against, conflict, or actually caring about the progress of other countries, is by, cultural exchange. And that's why, after World War II, Europe was all about this idea of like, okay, let's make sure that none of this happens again, and let's have like all our people in all these different countries.
Yes.
Like, you won't want to go to war with, or you'll care more about the economic status of another country if you have a bunch of friends there and your girlfriend's from there. And I think it's, if we're going to be living in this globalized fashion, I think it's more and more necessary to get people that opportunity. And like I said, like a lot of people in the US, like you said, rather, a lot of people in the US don't have the opportunity to go travel abroad. But if they're at a university, I feel like there should be like a stronger push to get more students who maybe this is their chance to go be abroad for a bit, and they won't get another opportunity until
Hmm.
they're in their late 20s or 30s, when they've, you know, built up a career and got the money to do something like that. I think it's really important that that starts to make a shift. Unfortunately, the international travel stuff is looking a little limited these days, but that's hopefully, I mean, in time that'll turn around. Um,
Yeah, it really Erasmus is such an incredible opportunity. You brought up something that is like very close to my heart, because it's I mean, just to give people a little better picture, I mean, yeah, like Johnny was saying, it basically every student in Europe, and not just in the European Union, but a lot of the surrounding countries too, and it even extends over into the Caucasus and some Asian countries too. So it's like
mhm.
kind of always expanding. Has the Erasmus program, and it is a funding. It's an educational funding program for like sports, youth work, and lifelong learning. So it's not just restricted to people that are getting their bachelor's or master's degrees, like higher education, but it's also open for like continuing education, for people who are like youth workers, health workers, like the workshops, all this kind of like continued adult learning. And they even do Erasmus for middle school and high school kids, where like even kids, I was teaching at a school the past 2 years at the international school. And even kids there are able to like do exchanges in Greece or Italy or like all kinds of places
Mhm.
all around Europe for like a week at a time. I mean, how cool is that? Even as a kid,
Yeah,
because
that's
like,
rad.
so I mean, and what's amazing is that, like you said, because European Union and after World War II, they wanted to create this much more unified continent. They make these things accessible for everybody. You got to you apply, maybe you sign up. I mean, maybe not every kid at the school gets to go, but if you're interested, you can be in like the Erasmus club or whatever, and you can take advantage of these opportunities. Maybe once or twice throughout your like learning career. I have to say, I've taken full advantage of that. I did a master's degree through the Erasmus program,
Mhm.
which was paid for by the European Union, and in fact also got a scholarship for it. Not trying to brag, I'm just trying to illustrate the opportunities for people out there. After that, there's a lot of other funding you can get for doing things like postgraduate work, studies, adult learning, like post-grad learning kinds of things. So I mean, it's and even voluntary service. They'll even fund like doing voluntary service internships, all kinds of projects. So it's just this really amazing educational opportunity, and that for me personally, I would love to bring that to the United States, like somehow extend that over the water. And I know there is
Yeah.
some push for that. We'll see what happens in the future. Unfortunately, it looks like the UK is losing the Erasmus program since they have left the EU. I don't know what they decided. They were debating it. They were losing it. I don't know if they got it back,
Mm.
but it's unfortunate for them. But it really, let's say this, the programs like that really help um, dissolve the xenophobia and help instigate lots of learning and like kind of worldliness amongst people. So it's amazing.
Absolutely.
Erasmus program, yeah. All
Woohoo!
right. Look, yeah. So everybody, if you need more information about that, I can drop that in the links in the description. Yeah. So let's shift gears for a moment. What about I'm curious now about like Norway, your experience here in Norway, bringing it more back up into the future now. Okay, so
Mhm. Yep.
Norway, everybody, you've all been listening to the Progressives Abroad podcast. You recognize that Norway at this point is let's say on many levels, not all, but many political levels, let's say, quite a progressive country when it comes to a lot of the social system, education system, these kinds of things. A lot of these things that, for example, our friend Bernie Sanders or other progressive candidates back in the States and in UK and other places around the world are pushing for. Well, they've got it here in Norway. But it also has a lot of misgivings. Anyway, but you came to Norway 3 years ago. What were your like original first impressions?
Um, Original first impressions, I guess, let's see. It was like I was down by the waterfront a lot. Just really like, it's like a mix of like classic Norwegian architecture, and then you have like these, you know, really beautiful modern Scandinavianly designed,
Mm.
high rises, and the opera house there really made a cool impression on me. I just was you know, digging the water a lot. I'm from Massachusetts. It kind of reminded me of Massachusetts, but like a little bit more on the nature aspect of it all. But coming from the U.S., the culture, I don't know, it didn't really stand out that much as something like, like going to a Barcelona or a place where all the streets are cobblestone, or it just felt like just a normal place, kind of bland, I guess, in that sense. But it wasn't a bad thing. Norwegian food, I guess the food that is more culturally Norwegian, kind of sucked. Besides the sursild, I like all the fish stuff.
Hmm.
They do that well. Um, but yeah, I thought it was like a nice place. I hit it off with the girl that brought me out here, and I had the early thoughts of wanting to move out here. I just never thought it was going to be because I was having a kid, and of course that's been more the bigger reason why I care to be here at the time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, but I think that's a pretty decent, pretty accurate description of probably how a lot of people feel when they come here. I mean, Norway, beautiful place, magnificent. Culture, very subdued for the most part, I
Mm,
would say. And that's how they like it here, I would say for the most part. I mean, um, just keeping it low key, not too much in your face. There is actually kind of like a social law here, which I always mispronounce it, but I think it's called like Juntoloven. It's like
mhm,
basically this is kind of social, unspoken kind of social rule that it's basically don't be too outstanding. You know what I mean? Like
mhm.
don't be too outspoken, like don't make a big deal about your thing. I mean, this is a country where celebrities can walk down the street and nobody bothers them.
Yeah,
I saw the prime minister walking down the street the other day. There's nobody around. I don't even think people noticed. And she had
yeah.
like
She kind of blends in.
she kind of blends in, yeah. But so yeah, I mean, yeah, and I think it's cool that you brought up the architecture, because for me, the architecture and the art in the city was actually the first thing in Oslo we're talking about here, was
Hmm.
the first thing that really hit me. I remember pulling up on the bus at night and seeing a lot of public art around, a lot of sculptures, big kind of factory looking buildings mixed with lots of like modern architecture. Um, and Oslo is a place that really has an appreciation for public art and also landscape architecture, because the nature here is so
Yeah.
important that they design a lot of a lot of the urban planning, and a lot of the architecture is very much integrated into the landscape, or somehow like reflects the landscape. So there's a lot of multi-use buildings, tons of park, tons of green spaces. Many call Oslo like the greenest city in the world, predominantly because about, I think, 63% of the city is wilderness.
Hmm.
Has a huge wilderness, a very little urban area actually in the city, in the whole city limits. But nonetheless, it's a beautiful place. Yeah, culturally, it's not something so outstanding. It's not like when you go to Miami and there's like music, popping out of
Yeah.
every window and people
Yeah.
dancing in the
Yeah.
street. It's low key. So if you like to get your quiet time, this is
Yeah. For some people, this is like
like paradise.
heaven. I like a
Quiet.
little chaos in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
when it comes to having a kid, and like
Yeah.
I wasn't like trying to be a parent at all, but it wasn't something that I was gonna not be a part of. And I was
Mm-hmm.
up for the challenge, but being someone out here where you don't have as much of like a social network, you're not working here, you're kind of like struggling with the whole parenting thing. Pushing around a stroller in this city, it sure beats being in a lot of other places, like kind of being stuck doing the parenting thing for the points you just made, like the parks and the beauty that you find around the little river that runs through town, and walking along that and feeding some ducks, which I've been doing quite a lot of. Those things are really, really nice, definitely nice. But I think that Norwegians, and I say this in a positive way, um, like they're just spoiled. They have everything like so good here, um, and they trust everything. They're not like dealing with the government that they're extremely skeptical of, and those are all great things. But when you're outside of it and you're not as integrated into it, and you're not working, then I don't know, it gets a little irritating at times. But I still appreciate it. Like I said, I just like a little bit more, you know, vibrancy in the culture. Like I like the Spanish and Italian cultures a lot, and just a little bit more like X factor sprinkled into the existence. When it came decision of like where we should be with our daughter and where to raise her, it was never really a question for me at all. The desire to be here. Obviously, Ina went through the pregnancy here in Norway. It's all the childcare related costs. There were none, so that was obviously a huge plus. But the early childcare programs here, the healthcare system, those were really big, compelling factors into why I wanted to be here. People in the U.S. always have this, question of like, oh, why don't you guys live here? And like, doesn't don't you guys want to be in the US? Like they think it's the place to be because they have just been kind of taught that the US is, the greatest place to be, and like you should want to be here in the
I
US.
mean, we're number one.
Yeah, we're number one. We're the
America is the
greatest.
greatest
We
country in the world. We're number
saved the
one.
world all these times.
God bless America.
Yeah, of course. And there are definitely, for me being from the US, there's definitely a lot more seemingly social mobility and potential. And that's where my networks are. But, for my daughter, US culture, luckily is pretty globalized at this point. It's everywhere. And I wanted my daughter, at least in her early formative years, to have, connection to, Norway, and so learn that language from someone other than her mom. English she hears from other people out here all the time. And so, yeah, I think this is the place to be. Also, I don't know if she has any major health issues underlying. So if there is, healthcare wise, I prefer to be here. And yeah, it's been a good challenge. I've just been in limbo for like 2 years, like working a little bit when I'm in the US, not able to work because I can't work legally, and I'm busy with childcare here in Norway. And so it's just been an ongoing process. And I was just starting to like take a shift pretty much like the day that they put the lockdown in order here, like pretty much the day that they announced it. I was kind of making a few changes in my life. So yeah, it's just a continuation of something I've been dealing with, this staying at home and not having a lot of social stuff going on. Yeah, but like there's plenty of places that would be way worse to be at than here.
Very interesting, dude. I think it sounds like, and I think we gotta do a bit more investigation into your story in a further episode, because it sounds very reasonable when you explain it, why you decided to stay here in Norway. But I'm sure that a lot of people out there would have a lot of questions about this, and when you say things like the healthcare system is better, and what it's like to be a parent here in Norway, and all kinds of stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I say I think we should let you go for today. But
Okay.
let's get back on. I want to talk a little bit more about what it's like to be a parent in Norway, and all how the system kind of works around you here, or not work,
Mm-hmm.
and also how it
Yeah.
is to kind of like socialize and stuff like that. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, thanks a lot for coming on the show today. We'll have you back again for part 2 real soon.
Looking forward to it.
All right, and that about wraps it up for today. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for Johnny for coming by the studio, and we'll definitely have you back again. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop it in the comment section below. You can always send us a message on our Facebook page, or you can send us an email. The email address is also in the details below. Don't forget, you can find us on all of the podcast distributors, iTunes, Spotify, and of course, Anchor. And please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We hope that you have a wonderful day. We hope that you're safe and healthy. And please join us again next time on Progressives Abroad.
Tell me what you do.